Gray Zone Warfare released on April 30th of 2024 in a virtually unplayable state. Now, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this video, don't get me wrong, and I do want to make it clear that I want Gray Zone Warfare to be a good game, and it probably will be one day. I've said that before in other videos covering Gray Zone Warfare, but unfortunately, when it released and 8 months later, it just isn't. Most of you by now probably know what Gray Zone Warfare is, especially if you follow and or play any type of shooter. For those of you who may not know what Gray Zone Warfare is, it is described as an intense tactical FPS emphasizing realism. Join a private military company to explore a vast MMO open world featuring PvE, VP, and strictly PvE modes. Strategize and survive against human operators and AI enemies while uncovering the mystery of Lemang Island. Lemang Island, maybe it's pronounced Lemang, is the gigantic Unreal Engine 5 built map that Gray Zone Warfare takes place in. It's beautiful, but it has also subsequently led to one of the game's biggest problems on launch and to this day, which is the utter lack of any sort of reliable performance at all. Now, at the time of recording this video, it is November 9th at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Gray Zone Warfare has 53 live viewers on Twitch and a 30-day peak of 1,400 players on Steam. The game is also sitting at nearly 50,000 reviews on Steam, all having combined for an overall rating of mixed, which I would say is putting it lightly. Now, again, Gray Zone Warfare's vision and potential is certainly grand, and it is something that I would love to see come to fruition. But having played the game when it first released, which we will talk about here in a moment, and having played the game again 2 weeks ago for roughly 3 hours on stream, the game is still in just as poor of a condition as it ever was, minus maybe a few GPU crashes and a little bit higher bump in frame rate. So where did Gray Zone Warfare start and where are we now? Well, as everyone knows who follows the extraction battle royale shooter scene, Gray Zone Warfare came to be in the midst of the Escape from Tarkov Unheard of Edition controversy, releasing a $250 expansion where they took away a lot of the promises they made to their core Edge of Darkness audience and instead slapped a hefty price tag on the new mode that would allow them to access what they were already told they would be given before. Now, you say what you will about Gray Zone Warfare having already established a release date around that time frame, which I believe was early to mid-March. However, it was clear that due to all of the backlash online and in the gaming community from Battlestate Games' decision to do what they did, Gray Zone Warfare released in an unplayable, unoptimized state simply to capitalize on said controversy, and they sure did rake in a whole hell of a lot of money doing it. Again, at the time of recording this video, MadFinger Games, which is the publisher of Gray Zone Warfare, has sold over 900,000 units of the game. Now, in case you haven't done the math, I'll do it for you. Gray Zone Warfare currently sits at $34.99 on Steam. When it originally released, it may have been roughly $19.99, so we'll assume the low end. That is roughly between $20 and $40 million Gray Zone Warfare has made in less than 1 year after publishing the game. Now, don't get me wrong, I fully support the publisher and the developer being paid for what they've created. They deserve to be. The employees that work at this company deserve to be. And again, I don't doubt their passion, their drive, their initiative to create something great. But in the words of the company itself, the game is only 20% completed. Still, 8 months later, to this day, at the time of recording this video, the game is only 20% completed. Now that in and of itself is an entirely different issue, specifically related to the lack of regulation and standards put in place by publishing platforms that allow games to be put out that charge consumers money in a highly unfinished state. To circle back to where I began this point, however, that is where Gray Zone Warfare released. That is the state of the industry and the condition that Gray Zone Warfare released in. Now, it was also very obvious, apart from the escape from Tarkov capitalization that they went for, that most of the individuals that were given early access to the game before it released had high-end PCs. These were high-profile streamers that had rigs that the common man or woman probably wouldn't have, advanced PC hardware. Now, me myself, I'm not running an entry-level PC rig. I'm certainly not running the highest-end PC, but the point is that it was a misrepresentation of where the game was. It was given to people, more than likely they were paid to play it, on PCs that were going to outperform 90% of most other people's PCs. PC hardware is expensive. It makes sense that people who stream and create content for a living have high-end PC hardware. They have to. It's their job and their job depends on it. But for most folks who are just playing games in the afternoon or in their free time on weekends, they don't have that type of high-end PC hardware. So it was a misrepresentation of where the game was, what the game looked like, and who was actually going to be able to run the game at all, which led us to the initial release when everyone was able to get their hands on the game, and a vast majority of them couldn't run the game due to GPU crashes, CPU overloads and overheating, etc., etc., etc. It is no exaggeration, and it isn't meant to be a jab, but it is no exaggeration that when Gray Zone Warfare released, it was abysmal. It was nearly as bad as when PUBG originally released. If you don't remember that, well then good for you. The game was virtually unplayable. Loading into the base camp looked like loading into a level of Minecraft. Granted, the map is beautiful when you can actually see it, and the game doesn't crash after attempting to load it, but it released in a terrible state. To give the developers credit where credit is due, they have been actively pushing hotfixes and quick patches for the last several months to address many of the issues that the player base has had when playing the game. And I will confirm, gladly, that when I booted up the game 2 weeks ago to stream it, I was able to maintain a consistent frame rate at 1440p with no crashes, which is great. I'll give them credit for at least getting the game there. It's by no means perfect, especially when flying over the map in a helicopter, but it was a hell of a lot better than it was before. Moving on though, let's dive into some things that are a little bit more specific and to the point of my reasoning for making this video. First and foremost, jumping right out of what I was just explaining with my frame rate and where the game was versus where the game is, overall the performance of the game is still very subpar. The frame rates are all over the place. I have been able to maintain them more consistently as of recent, but getting into gunfights, engaging in high activity areas with multiple people around, be it AI or teammates, helicopter rides across the map, the game's frame rate and optimization for memory, stability, whatever it is that it may be, polygon count, is rough. At this point, I wouldn't say that the performance is horrible, but it's certainly nowhere near what it needs to be to account for a smooth and optimal gameplay experience. I've gone through every setting there is to change multiple times over, watched video after video on the best way to optimize performance for Gray Zone Warfare, and at the end of the day, my opinion on this is the same. It will always be the same. I should not have to change the settings of my PC to play your game. That is not my job. It is your job as a developer who understands polygon count, memory optimization, networking infrastructure, all of these things to optimize your game to run on most players' machines. Not the high end of the player base, but most players' machines. No, I'm not talking about turning off full screen optimizations or setting a game up for performance over quality. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about forums and threads and Discord posts that have you go into your BIOS or go into your registry and start editing configurations of your machine and system to play one single game. That's not my job. It's your job to make your game not suck. I'm not sure exactly how they animated or programmed their character model, the first-person player model that you use in the game, but it's still extremely clunky and unfluid. I have sort of gotten the hang of how you're supposed to continue running through a turn, and by a turn, I mean when your player looks left and right while running, not free looks, but actively rotates their body to go left or right. For some reason in this game, and I have no idea why, your player stops running when you change directions. I, again, have kind of gotten the hang of how that works. You almost have to make a wide circular sort of semicircle type loop around your pivot point so that you don't stop running. Otherwise, you just end up looking like an idiot, and if you're trying to get away from someone or get to something, your character just flat out stops moving. I have no idea why it's that way. The player model, the character model, the controller, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. The running feels okay. It doesn't feel necessarily bad to run in the game, but the overall navigation of the character controller and movement, especially when running, entering a run, or stopping a run, is terrible. As of right now, there still isn't any real unique loot in the game. When navigating the map and looting all of the areas in the map, as well as killing the AI players if you're playing PvE. If you're playing PvP, then you do stand a far better chance of coming out with better loot. But the map and the AI enemies themselves really don't provide anything unique at all. Fanny packs, 2x2 backpacks, tactical belts with 2 slots, a baseball cap, maybe an AK-47 with a couple of 10-round mags. Overall, looting the map and killing the enemy players just doesn't really lead to anything worth celebrating. The helicopter system is still a giant pain in the ass. At any given point, there are roughly 3 to 5 helicopters circling the entire map for every single player on that map to fight over and over again by spamming request helicopter transport deployment, whatever the button says, just to be told negative. Helicopters have been addressed multiple times. In my opinion, I don't think it's gotten any better. I understand that you can't have a map full of helicopters, otherwise the performance would just be bogged down even more. But there has got to be a better way to solve traversing the map and getting from point to point without the entirety of the map, and the map is huge, fighting over the same 3 to 5 helicopters every single time. Another system of the game that I have slowly gotten the hang of a little bit more is the medical items system, but there are still a few quirks that I don't really understand about the game or why they even exist, and this is really more of a personal preference rather than something I think is inherently wrong with the game, because it doesn't necessarily affect the gameplay. One of which, though, is the fact that your player can be bruised, which apparently will heal on its own but still causes pain and a physical reaction, but you can also heal bruises with a light bandage. I guess I have that right. There's also the whole blood transfusion thing, which you can use using a blood transfusion kit, or again, just like a light bandage. Again, haven't played the game in a few weeks now, so I could have some of those quirks mixed up, but there are a few things in the game that seem redundant when it comes to medical items and their usage, and there are also injuries that your player can seem to sustain that don't really affect you, but do cause a physical reaction that can be healed, but don't necessarily have to be healed. I don't know, it's just a bit odd to me to have that. I guess it adds to the realism, I suppose. The last thing I'm going to touch on here when it comes to my core issues with the game at this particular point in time is sort of tied to the original point I made about performance, and that's that the game is still just so unbelievably resource hungry. When having my task manager open while playing this game, my CPU is blasting blasting, my GPU is blasting, my RAM is fucking blasting. I'm running a Ryzen 9 5750X, 32 gigs of RAM, liquid cooled, a 4070 RTX, blah, 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 blah. It's not a $10,000 machine. It certainly isn't an entry level machine. I have absolutely no problem blowing any game I play out of the water on 1440p, except for Gray Zone Warfare. Tarkov has to be thrown in there as well. I don't know when Tarkov will ever get better performance, if it ever will, but I can't just say Gray Zone without including Tarkov as well. But overall, Gray Zone Warfare is an unbelievably resource hungry game. It is an extremely labor intensive game on your machine. I could only imagine that if you had a quote-unquote entry level or budget build machine, your efforts in trying to even load the game, let alone play it, which is another little sidebar. Usually when I boot up Gray Zone Warfare, I have to do it 2 to 3 times because it just gets stuck on the damn splash screen. I also forgot to mention as well, folks, and the list keeps growing the more that I think about it while I'm recording this video, but I cannot tell you how many times I have gone into a raid and completed an item, completed a task. I get the little green pop-up in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Task has been completed. Go into the tasks menu, there's a green check mark. I get back to base camp and it will not let me finish the task. It won't complete the task. It doesn't allow me to claim the reward from the trader. This happened multiple times with the medic task where I have to go into the map, get the little medic bundle, whatever the hell it's called, bring it back to the medic. It's just stuck in my inventory. It won't let me give it to her. I can't sell it. I can't do anything with it. It's just sitting there. That happened the same time when I had to go discover 2 locations early on in the game. Green check mark, notification in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Task has been completed. Get back to the base camp. It literally does nothing. Everything is marked off. Everything is completed, but I cannot progress through the task because it just won't work. Which brings me to the heart and soul of the next point of this video. Why do you keep teasing an update for your game when the game needs it now? It needed it 3 months ago. It's 8 months into the development cycle of the game, and all I'm seeing on Twitter and Reddit is, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Check out our live stream. Check out our live stream. Big information is coming. Dude, we don't need more information. We need you to update the game so that it remains playable. How about that it even remains relevant? Because quite frankly, and again, I'm gonna say this multiple times, the game could be great and I would love to see that, but no one is going to continue to care about your 2-year roadmap when the game's updates take 8 months to get. And you say what you will about how difficult it is and hard it is to update the game and how everyone's working on it and blah, blah, blah. Well, hey, here's a thought. You should have thought about that before you released it in a 20% completed condition. If it was gonna be real hard to put together updates to make the game playable and fun and stay relevant, then maybe you should have waited until it was more than 20% complete to release it. That's just an insane sort of ethereal thought, I know, that most people who are attached to early access games don't agree with. But, you know, I'm just throwing that out there. Just throwing that curveball out there. The point is that if this is the way that things continue to go, the game is just not gonna be it. And let me say this. The reason that a game like this wouldn't survive that type of roadmap and the delay between updates that they have set out for everybody is because the game is not delivering something that is wholly and entirely unique. If you're not playing Gray Zone Warfare, you could just go play Tarkov, or you could just go play Arena Breakout. You see what I'm saying? It's not like Gray Zone Warfare is providing anyone something that they can't get somewhere else, which is why it's not gonna work. It will for the few people who are really dedicated to supporting this game, and I do want to see the game do well because the map is beautiful. I think it's a really cool idea and vision for what an extraction shooter could be. But the reason that this whole thing they have going on doesn't work long term is because it's not providing anything you can't get somewhere else. If I have to wait 9 months for an update from Gray Zone Warfare, I'll just go fucking play Tarkov and I'll forget all about Gray Zone Warfare, which is exactly what's happened. That's why there's only 50 people watching it on Twitch, and that's why the 30-day peak is only right above 1,000 players in the entire world. Now I'm gonna try to spare you guys and gals from an hour-long video of me just rambling about this game and many others like it by tying up these last few points together. Overall, and I want you to understand this before you type in the comments about how much of an idiot I am and how I don't understand early access games, bro. It's early access. It says early access. Yeah, I know that. I get it. What you don't understand, though, is that for one, there used to be a time in gaming when you would pay for a product and it would be finished. And it would work, and it would run well. And maybe you played a beta or 2 betas. Maybe you went and you got a disc to play the beta. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is that Gray Zone Warfare, in all of its glory and its potential, is still stuck in one of the biggest permeating issues that the gaming industry faces right now, specifically when it comes to shooter games, which is releasing products that aren't finished. Don't even call them early access. Let's just pretend that early access didn't even exist. When you release a product that's not finished, this is what happens. For all of the people out there who say that they have to do that because they're a small publisher and they need the money, that is incorrect. 110% completely false. False. Businesses that have opened in your neighborhood didn't walk around the neighborhood and ask everybody for donations, did they? No. That local mom and pop shop that's open down the street, maybe it's been there for 20 years, maybe it's only been there for 2 years. Did they come knocking on your door and ask for money? No, because that's not good business. And anyone with any ounce of common sense understands that there are people out there, venture capitalists, whoever, that have the money to give, who believe in these types of projects. That's what Kickstarter and Indiegogo was kind of for, so that you don't have to ask the player base to fund your game. That's my radical idea. I know a lot of people in this space don't agree with it. A lot of people think that going and buying a car with only 3 wheels just to be told the 4th one will be here someday is totally fine. I know a lot of people believe that. I know a lot of people are so used to being served plates of shit, steaming hot piles of shit, that when they actually get a nice, juicy, moist steak in front of them, they just don't know what to do with it. I get that. It's not your fault that you've been conditioned into this market of gaming that we currently exist in. I've made other videos about it. It's obviously a passionate subject for me, and that's another thing I want you guys to get. Gray Zone Warfare, whatever game it is, I'm speaking from a place of passion because games really do need a strong influx of quality content right now. Again, specifically in the shooter, battle royale, extraction space. I think RPGs and indie games are thriving. Those games are doing great. I've had a lot of fun playing a lot of different types of those games. But specifically in the shooter space, we really need a good, strong flux of quality products, because time after time after time after time, seeing a game pop up, early access in 2 weeks, man. Early access November 14th. Early access January 1st. It's so unbelievably disheartening as someone who is highly passionate about content, about gaming, about shooter games, to constantly be given a half-baked product with a promise that we may never see come true, and by and large, usually does not ever come true, continue to happen over and over and over again. So you have to understand, I'm not trying to speak from a position of just shit talking, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with having early access as a division of gaming. What the problem is now is that early access